Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're joining in the world. Welcome to the fifth and next edition of Big Data Days 2024. I cannot believe that this day is finally here. The day that we've been working so hard towards in the last 6 months to put together a program, find supporting sponsors, and make sure that everyone across the entire world can join. Today, I have the great honor to open the Big Data Days conference. And for the next 2 days, we're going to talk extensively around data, what it is, how it's changing the world, and all of the cool and wonderful technologies that everybody is using every day. My name is Jan-Willem Middelburg, and I have the great honor to be your host again for this Big Data Days event. In the first 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to tell you a little bit around the logistics, how this platform works, which amazing prizes you can win, and introduce some of the speakers and sponsors that make this event possible. After that, I will start diving right away into the first session. So buckle up, we're ready for Big Data Days 2024. Today, I have the great honor to host this session together with my colleague, Jan-Willem. As you might have seen in the program, there are 2 tracks for Big Data Days 2024. I will be hosting track number 1, and my colleague Jan-Willem, who will introduce himself during the next session, will be the host of track number 2. Feel free during the entire next 2 days to ask us all kinds of questions related to any of the speakers, content, or anything else you would like to ask. This year, we have been putting together a program on which I'm incredibly proud. We have once again collected some of the brightest minds in the data industry. And we have speakers ranging from the United States towards Australia and almost every country in between. The pictures that you see here on the screen are the speakers that you will have the opportunity to connect with in the next few days. Each of them has volunteered to make their time available in order to learn you something around data. So this is a unique opportunity to connect with him. I would once, before we get started, like everyone to put your hands, or at least your virtual hands, together for this great list of speakers who will be giving you the latest and greatest in the world of big data. Besides the speakers, this event would also not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors and partner community. On the logo, you see close to a dozen partners who have made this event possible. I would like to sincerely thank, on behalf of the Enterprise Big Data Framework Alliance, all of these partners who are volunteering time, effort, and money in order to make sure that this conference can be enjoyed for free by everyone in the world. This year, we will be using the Zoho Backstage platform for hosting this event again. And in order to get you familiar with some of the key features, I would like to give you a very brief overview of how you can interact and engage with us throughout the next few days. The interface that you see in front of you consists of the slides, speakers, and opportunities to interact. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a chat functionality. And I've seen that many of you have already found this functionality. Here you can ask questions, and our team will be monitoring the chat throughout the entire duration of the conference. So if you need immediate support, have questions around the logistics, then by all means, please feel free to use the chat. Another critical functionality that you can use throughout this conference is the question box, which you can see with the little question mark on the right-hand side. During any of the speaker sessions, we encourage you to put questions into this question box. Other participants can see which questions have been asked and either upvote or downvote them. As hosts of this conference, towards the end of each session, we will pick 3 or 4 questions depending on the time, and we will moderate them. So you have an opportunity to interact. We can also unmute you in case you would like to ask a question directly, but then please let us know either in the question box or through the chat. And then we have something new this year, and that is that we have gamification built into the platform. And this means that we will see who's interacting, and at the end of this conference, you actually can win prizes based on interaction. So we will look at the way that you can clap your hands, put smiley faces. If there's a statement that you find strange, you can also let us know that. So there's a lot of different ways in which you can interact throughout the program. Now, I know that this conference is hosted throughout multiple time zones throughout the entire world, and it might not be possible to join all sessions live, but we will keep track of interaction throughout all the different sessions that are going to be presented in the next 2 days. So make use of this functionality if you would like to win some prizes. Other than that, another new thing this year is the mobile app. So even if you're on the go and you need to commute to or from work, you can still keep joining Big Data Days. You can download the Zoho Backstage app and log in with the same registration details with which you registered, and you will be able to follow this program live on your mobile as well. As I mentioned before, this conference is deliberately hosted so that as many people over the entire world can join, but we also recognize that you might not be able to attend all sessions. So after 1 or 2 days after the conference, all the recordings will be made available. The recordings will be posted up on the online platform as well as on our YouTube channel, for which I highly encourage you to subscribe. Other than that, of course, in this digital age, we strongly encourage you to keep interacting with us. And in order to do that, we have the hashtag Big Data Days 2024. You can also connect with us through our website, the YouTube channel, X, or our LinkedIn posts. So if you don't follow us yet, we strongly encourage you to do this so that you will be kept up to date around latest developments during this whole conference. Good. We have a lot of goodies and giveaways this year that our sponsors and partners have generously made available to all. And I would like to start with making everyone aware that you can download the free Enterprise Big Data Professional Guide, which is the introductory book of the Enterprise Big Data Framework Alliance, and which prepares you for the Enterprise Big Data Professional exam. On the link that you will see here on the screen, and one of my colleagues will put this into the chat shortly, you will find a direct way in which you can download this guide. It's a free book of close to 200 pages with some of the thinking around how to become a data-driven organization. So I highly encourage you to download this publication. Other than that, I'm also very pleased to announce that everyone who is attending this conference live and is dedicating some of their valuable time to join our program will receive a free membership of the Enterprise Big Data Framework Alliance. This membership is valid for 1 year and will provide you with 25% discount on all of the online products, courses, and exam vouchers. It also provides you with free access to an online member user group in which questions and experts are sharing their discussions and opinions. And maybe most importantly, it will give you free access to all of the educational white papers, the different manuals, as well as the course book and sample exams. This membership normally costs $50 per year, but we're making it freely available for everyone who is joining this conference live. At the end of this conference, you will receive a link and an automated email based on your participation that will give you a discount code where you can sign up for the individual membership. This discount code will remain valid until the end of the week, so I encourage you to sign up quickly for this membership offer. Other than that, I would like to take a moment to introduce the program. Our team has done an incredible amount of work to once again find expert speakers all across the world. And I'm super excited and proud to be able to introduce this year's program to you. I'm not going to read out all the different sessions because you can very quickly find that on our website, but I'd just like to make you familiar of the structure. Every day, we will join and start the day together with an opening keynote, and we will end the day together also with a closing keynote. In between these two sessions, we will then move into a number of tracks. Some of these tracks will be discussing a particular topic in depth, and other tracks, there will be more workshop-led sessions in which you need to roll up your sleeves and participate while one of the experts is providing a tutorial on a particular data topic. So I strongly encourage you to really think around which sessions you would like to attend. Note that on your online environment, you can bookmark certain sessions, which means that you're automatically redirected whenever that next session is coming up. We will have 3 breakout sessions followed by a 1-hour panel discussion, and then again 3 breakout sessions in the afternoon followed by a closing keynote. The agenda for the second day is very similar, with the exception that at the end of day 2, we will make sure that there's also the presentations of the Big Data Awards, for which a lot of people and organizations are again in suspense about who this year's winner will be. Another key thing that or a request that we often receive is whether people can get a certificate of attendance. And the answer to that question is yes. And if you would like to receive a certificate of attendance after this session or after this conference, please fill in the details by scanning the QR code that is displayed now on the screen. And then you will get a custom-made certificate of participation for this particular conference, with which you can claim, in many cases, different attendance points. So if you would like that, once again, the QR code is on the screen, and you would need to fill out the form in order to request that. Good. And then the moment everyone has been waiting for, what are some of the goodies and giveaways that we're going to give away during these Big Data Days? First and foremost, note that we have this new interactive platform, which includes gamification. In the top right corner of your screen, you can actually see a button that showcases your current score. And we're excited to announce that the top 3 attendees who engage most during the conference will win a completely free online course, which is the Data Literacy Fundamentals course, which will make you familiar with the essence of data literacy and prepare you for the data literacy exam. At any moment in time, you can connect or you can see the amount of points that you've scored so far. And by engaging, filling out reviews, letting us know what you think, your score will become higher and higher. At any moment in time, you can also see the leaderboard on the right-hand side. So we strongly encourage you to keep an eye on that. And if you are interested in winning this prize, to engage as much with us as possible during this entire conference. Another key prize is made available by our keynote speaker, Jordan Morrow, who wrote the book, Be Data Literate. And during this closing keynote, we will be hosting a lucky draw to make sure that one lucky attendee will win this book. I've read the book myself, and I think it's an excellent publication. So I strongly encourage you to join Jordan's sessions as well. and have a chance of winning this physical hard copy book, which will be shipped to you after the conference. Other elements are, or another great book is made available by Irvin Ho. And this book is called Sticky Slides, Presentation Design Made Simple. And it contains 6 key lessons for creating effective and impactful slides. If you would like to have a chance of winning this book, I strongly encourage you to join Irvin Ho's session, who will be giving away 2 books to attendees who answers some of his online questions in the polls correctly. And throughout this whole program, speaking about polls, we also will have a quiz during the conference. And during this conference, we'll present 5 different questions during keynotes and panel discussions. And attendees who answer correctly will enter into a draw, and ultimately 3 lucky winners will be announced, who also will get access to the data literacy fundamentals course. And since we're at the start of this next session, we're right away going to launch our first key question. And the first question that we're going to be asking is, which famous mathematician and codebreaker is often considered one of the pioneers of modern computing and artificial intelligence? And the choices that you will have to answer this question are Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, or Alan Turing. Let me quickly see if the poll is up already. Let me do that right here. Good, and if it's correct, everyone should be able to see the poll right now. It does, because I see a lot of people voting already. Very good. I see some people have it correct, some people don't. We're at 30 votes already, and it keeps going up. Very good. So keep the voting going, and I will close the poll in around 5 seconds. Good, and there we go. And we have more than 50 votes coming in right now. Great. In this case, let me close the poll in 3, 2, 1. And the poll is closed. Still some mixed answers. The right answer in this case is obviously Alan Turing. But if you didn't have that correct, then no worries. There's still 4 more rounds to go in order to make sure that you get a possibility to win this fantastic prize. Good. So this concludes my brief introduction of what you can expect during this conference and some of the logistics, prizes, speakers, as well as sponsors who make this event possible. For me, this is a very special edition of Big Data Days because, as you might have seen in our communications earlier, this is the 5th edition that we are hosting this particular conference. And therefore, as the author of the Enterprise Big Data Framework, I am thrilled and honored to be able to host this opening keynote with you today. And for this opening keynote, I have chosen a theme which is very much new and about which I think you should know a little bit more in the years to come. And I've chosen to label my keynote Quantum Leap, Unleashing the Power of AI for Transformative Insights, because we are slowly but surely moving towards a quantum data age. And what that means is something that I will explain to you within the next few minutes. In order to kind of give you a bit of an overview of what we're going to be discussing, is that I'm going to introduce to you the word and keyword data quantum. And then I'm obviously going to touch upon one of the key topics which you will see coming back over and over again throughout this entire conference. But I'm specifically going to talk about how generative AI has evolved over the last year, some of its key benefits, but we're also going to look at some of the key challenges. By now, I'm quite sure that everyone knows what Gen AI is, so I'm not going to go into the technical details like last year, but we're going to specifically look at what this means for individuals and organizations, specifically for decision making. And in order to explain that a little bit more, I'm going to be introducing what for many people will be a new term, and that is the use of synthetic data and how generative AI is creating, managing, and manipulating that to a very, very significant extent. After this bits of theory and some of the elements with which I hope you will get a better understanding of the world that we're living in today, I'm also going to share with you some critical lessons of advice on what are the steps that you and your organization can take today to address some of these opportunities and challenges that are created by this world of generative AI and the increasing adoption and rise of artificial intelligence. So that's what I've prepared for you this morning. Let me get started with a critical term. And before I'm going to give you the answer, I would like all of you to think about what data quantum is. And maybe if you have a minute or two, put your thoughts into the chat. I'm already going to give you a heads up. This is not a term that you see being used a lot. So if you Google it, you might see different kinds of definitions around that. But that's the whole point. I would like to make you familiar with something new and something that you cannot very easily Google during this presentation. I'm not going to give you the answer just yet, and I will build up why I've chosen to label my presentation around this term, and ultimately why this is a term that is the key topic of our entire conference for this year. So take a moment to let that sink in. Think about what the word quantum means and how it's being used in everyday life. And towards the end of this keynote, I'm going to give you some more details around what it means and how it could be used by organizations. Good, let's get started with a bit of recap. As I just mentioned, this is the 5th year that we're hosting the Big Data Days. And it's interesting if you look at that historical perspective to see that the world has very, very greatly changed in those 5 years. The first edition of Big Data Days, the word artificial intelligence was discussed, but not to the extent that we're using it today. And I'd like to start in one of my opening slides with a picture that I showed you during last Big Data Days, so the one that was hosted last year. And already in Big Data Days 2023, we talked about generative AI a lot. And I showed you one of the pictures that you see here on the slide, which is coming from the Asia School of Business. And I always really like this picture because it shows you the adoption and the parameters in terms of how much data is being used for training specific models. And if you look at specific other models that have been created previously, you saw that they had different, and note that the X's are in millions, 17 billion data sets. So the model that was used by GPT-3 was not just a little bit more comprehensive. It was around 10 times larger than everything that has been trained and been created before. And that's one of the reasons why it took the world by storm. And already in last year's Big Data Days, we talked about this a lot. And in order to start the session, I really would like you to see that you need a tremendous, and I literally mean a tremendous amount of data in order to create, develop, and train these large language models. And if you look at ChatGPT in specific, then on the right-hand side, you can see where this data comes from. And the primary source behind the ChatGPT model is the Common Crawl data, which is a nonprofit organization that crawls the internet on a daily basis and keeps archives around all the web pages that were ever created in the world on the entire internet. So that's a massive amount of data. And note that this conference is obviously called the Big Data Days. So we're going to talk about the size and impact of data a lot. Now, this is a bit of recap. If you've joined me last year during Big Data Days, you might recognize or might remember this slide. But I always want to make sure that everyone is on the same page and knows that some of the technologies that we're using today really, really require a fundamental amount of data for them to be effective. Now, it's fair to say that since last year, our whole fascination with generative AI hasn't stopped. If anything, it has only expanded. And while we were composing the program for this year, we saw that this theme was coming back a lot. So over the last years, a lot of research has been done, a lot of new product has come out. Google has their own product, AWS is working on the product, even Apple is working on their own product. But I wanted to highlight, and I'm going to start with some of the research first. I wanted to highlight some of the critical developments around generative AI, which I think is very, very amazing. And on the left-hand side, you see some of the research that was done by Forbes that showcases who is using generative AI. And not surprising to see, you will see that adoption just within that 18 months since this generative AI hype was launched has gone up very significantly. Almost 3 out of 4 people in the Indian populations that were surveyed say that they're using generative AI. Almost half of the Australian and US market, and almost 30% of the UK population. The reason that I'm showing you this is that this new technology is fundamentally changing the way that people work and fundamentally changing the way that people operate on a day-to-day basis. So it's also going to fundamentally change businesses. Now, that's the first key point that I want you to know. I would literally say that everyone is using it. And if you haven't used it before, then hopefully after this conference, you will be convinced that this is definitely something that you need to look into. Now, more significant research is shown on the right-hand side of the slide. And that means, how is it changing behavior? What is the result of that generative AI development? And on the right-hand side, you see some of the data that's coming from Salesforce research that showcases differentiation in terms of application of this technology. 65% of generative AI users are millennials or Gen Z, of which 72% are employed. Nearly 6 in 10 users believe they are on their way to mastering the technology. And the third key point is something I really would like to highlight in order to make you familiar around what the impact of this new technology is. I actually put a slight exclamation part because if there's one thing I really want you to take away during this opening keynote is that 70% of the people surveyed for this report said that they use the technology. But more importantly, I would like to highlight that 52% of them trust the technology and that generative AI helps them to make informed decisions. And that's massive, because if we think about the fact that this technology was not there or not to the extent that we are using it today 2 years ago, versus today, where more than half the people who participated in this study say that it influences their decision on a day-to-day basis, and that they feel that they can trust the data that's getting out there, then that is a very, very, very significant conclusion. And we need to break that down a little bit, because that's going to have an impact directly on the way that businesses operate, and it's going to have a direct way in which decisions all across the world are going to be made. I'd like you to internalize that a little bit, let that sink in, because this is obviously going to be a slow stepping bridge towards moving towards that key term of data quantum. So let's explain and explore that a little bit more in detail. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to explain what it is anymore. I'm quite sure that everyone here knows what ChatGPT is and how it works and prompting. But I would like to introduce another key term, which I think most people are not so familiar with. And that is the rise and the definition of synthetic data. And with synthetic data, we mean the data that is created by these generative AI applications. So if you're ever creating new images or maybe even a video or just text with generative AI, what you are literally creating is synthetic data, because that data wasn't there before and it's generated based on a machine learning or generative AI model that will create this new data source. So that's what synthetic data is. And now, if you think a little bit deeper around that, we have just seen that the adoption of generative AI is massive. And over the years, we have generated a lot of traditional data by smartphones, social media applications, you name it. But the speed with which we are using generative AI at this moment is leading towards the conclusion that you see on the screen by Gartner, and that says that by 2030, which is only 6 years from now, and I'm hoping we will still have a big data days 2030 by that time, the majority of the data used for the development of AI and analytics projects will be synthetically generated. And that's a very important sentence, because it shows that the data that we're using today in order to create these kinds of models is completely generated by AI models in the first place. And this is the reason that I just showed you how ChatGPT was trained and that open source data on all the pages on the internet first, because that is going to have very significant implications. So there's a lot of benefits to creating those synthetic data, but there are also some drawbacks and some elements that you would truly need to understand in order to evaluate this technology a little bit more in depth. And that's what I'm going to cover next. So synthetic data, just to summarize a little bit, is data that is created by generative AI models, which are typically trained on real-world data samples. So as you might be familiar, generative AI models are trained on original data, and as we move from left to right, this is going to be leading towards synthetic data. And that synthetic data is data that wasn't there, but that was created deliberately by a generative AI model. So if you're using the Gen AI to, let's say, write an essay and create a new job description or create an article for a website, then basically what you're doing is you're creating this synthetic data and you're storing it somewhere. Now, any Gen AI model will work in more or less the same way. There's obviously technical differences between them, but the thing that they all have in common is that based on original data, they create synthetic data. And that synthetic data looks and feels the same as the original data the algorithms were trained upon. So we all know and agree that generative AI is very effective. So if you create a job description by generative AI, it will look and feel as real as some job description that was written, let's say, by somebody on the HR team. And that's an important element to take into account. Now, let's build upon that a few steps further, because if you now start to understand that generative AI models are trained on input data, and you know what synthetic data is, then I'm going to introduce you to this inevitable cycle that we're in. And we can argue around whether that's good or bad or somewhere in between. But the reality is that this is happening at this moment. And I'm going to run you very briefly through the number of different steps. And we're going to start all the way at the top, is that we have mostly original data in the world right now. So this is data that was created by mankind, machines over the last decades, centuries. And that is the majority of data as we now use it today. That data, like the data that was used from the internet pages upon which GPT-3 was trained, leads toward input, and that is used for model training. And this is why I think everyone should be familiar with how this technology works, because you truly need to understand that for any of those models to make accurate predictions, you need a significantly large data set for it to be any good. So in other words, we're using the source data that we've created as humankind in order to train the models that we are building. Now, what those models will do is that they are going to be making predictions. They will create new text, new videos, new images. And in other words, they will be creating predictions that will lead towards synthetic data. If you look at image generators, text generators, ultimately what they will do, they will be making a prediction. What is the best possible response based on a lot of input? And that was ultimately a prediction about what the best answer will be. And these predictions lead to synthetic data. And that's what the term that I just introduced. And here's the interesting part, and one of the key takeaways that I really would like you to get from this keynote is that this synthetic data is then pushed out into the real world. So again, let's use a very simple example. Suppose that you write an article online based on a generative AI solution, then you're putting that data on the internet, and the next time that some kind of web scraper will capture the data from the internet, it's going to look at that data from a source perspective. And this is the cycle that we're in with the entire world today. New models that will be trained in the future will not only include our original source data, they will also include the data that was generated synthetically by generative AI models. And this is a very important cycle to realize. Now, in order to illustrate this, I'm going to give you a real life example. And I thought it would be fun, because we're in a big data conference, to use a very simple example around data science. So in order to do this, I thought it would be nice to use a picture, in this case, of the first female computer scientist. And for those of you who are interested in this field, I obviously am. The lady that you see depicted here is called Ada Lovelace. And many sources quote her as the first female computer scientist that contributed quite a bit towards computing systems as we now know it today. She has a very fascinating story, which is a topic for another day. But I strongly encourage you to kind of look this up, read about it, because it's a very, very interesting story to know about. Now, I want to show you that cycle a little bit more in detail. So the way that generative AI works around this right now is that if you go online, most sources will quote Ada Lovelace to be the first female computer scientist. The data that is available online and in those sources will then feed into generative AI models. And based upon that training of those models subsequently, I'm following the exact same steps that you saw on the previous slide, a new Gen AI model will predict that Ada Lovelace is the most likely computer scientist. And as a result, new articles or videos will be produced that will reinforce that message, because the prediction based on that input data that Ada Lovelace is the first female computer scientist will be the highest, or at least the percentage. So that will lead towards articles about that. And this synthetic data is then added to the source data, which will keep reinforcing that message over time. In other words, if the majority agrees that this is the data that should be trained upon, this truth is reinforced. And note that I deliberately put the word truth between question marks, because I'm also going to show you another kind of example to illustrate this point a little bit better. The main reason that I've chosen this specific example is that, unfortunately, in many cases in life, the truth is more complex than just a few statements. And in order to illustrate that, think about this article, which you will see, which is coming from Wikipedia. And this is the article about the same lady that I just told you about. And if you read the article carefully, and I've highlighted the part that's really interested and kind of enlarged it a little bit so that everyone can read it more in detail. Lovelace, it says Lovelace is now considered by many to be the first computer programmer, and her method has been called the world's first computer program. But then after that, you see others dispute this because she was an apprentice of Charles Babbage, earlier writings, and that could be considered the computer program that she is now accredited for. In other words, we're not going to go into the intricacies of this case, but I'd like you to know that there is some debate or at least argument around whether she was that first female computer scientist. Now, in order to illustrate the effect of that dispute, I'm going to show you a real life query in ChatGPT that could look and could result into an issue with that cycle that I just showed you. Let me show you that a little bit more in detail. So here we see the interface of ChatGPT. You see my picture. I created this prompt in preparation for this conference. And I first type in who was the first computer scientist. And again, based on the data that ChatGPT has been trained upon, which includes Wikipedia articles, it comes back that Ada Lovelace is often regarded as the first computer programmer and computer scientist. Now that's interesting, and so far I would say so good. But now let's see what happens if I call that into question. So my next prompt is really, I thought this claim was disputed because the work was actually done by Charles Babbage, and this is the reason that I just showed you that article. And now ChatGPT is coming back and saying, yes, you're correct, there's been some discussion. If you take that into consideration, it's not just that part. We need to think about another person. So in my third question, I will ask ChatGPT, well, if it's not Ada Lovelace, who is it going to be? And if that's the question, then ChatGPT comes back with a completely different name, in this case, Grace Hopper. And I'm hoping that you're already starting to see what's happening right here. We are putting into question the data upon which the model was trained, which is basically what I'm doing. And I am therefore trying to convince the generative AI model that they were actually wrong. And in this case, that they should base and predict something different in a next iteration. And suppose that you follow this particular query, and then you will ask, and this I promise you that this is the final part, I will then ask, could you write an article about the first female computer scientist, Grace Hopper, which was the second person on the list? Then you will see that ChatGPT will actually create an article upon claiming that Grace Hopper was the first female computer scientist, whereas I have manipulated the program in such a way to do this. Now, this is synthetic data, and this is the reason that I explained this earlier. So the key point of this thought experiment and exercise is that we are retraining and creating synthetic data, which we're putting, in this case, online, and you could use this for an article. But the next time that a Gen AI model will be trained, it's going to take into account this particular article, which is now created. And that's an interesting and slightly scary result and slightly scary conclusion. Because if we are looking back at our previous model and that reinforcement cycle, we saw that synthetic data is now added to our source data, and that a new model will include that changed model. And it's not hard to see that if you understand how this works, you could very easily tweak or change future predictions just by generating a lot of data that will claim otherwise. And that's something that is really interested and really the world that we're living in today. Now, why am I making this point? Obviously, remember that I started my presentation with the word data quantum. And I hope that most of you have taken some time to thought about this, because the word quantum has been used before. Some of you might remember this from the James Bond movie, Quantum of Solace. For those of you who are fans of Marvel, there is Quantum Mania, which is also a very interesting movie. And then some of those of you who might be coming from the more academic domains will immediately think about Einstein and quantum mechanics, which is looking at particles and the structure in science. So in all of these different pictures that you see here on the slide, the word quantum is used. So if we look at the English dictionary and you look up the word quantum, you will find, and I've used the Oxford Dictionary, is that it says that it's the smallest amount or unit of something, especially energy, because it's predominantly used in quantum mechanics. Now, why is this relevant from a data perspective? Take into account the whole journey that we've gone through in this lecture, moving from how models are trained towards the creation of synthetic data, and understanding that that synthetic data is again used to train future models. And we've also concluded, based on the research of Gartner, that synthetic data will eventually overtake original data. So in order to do that in a sustainable, safe, and future-proof way, we need to define a data quantum. And a data quantum, in my definition, and again, I know that there are different definitions all across the world if you look this up, is the smallest part of original truth. Because if you train any future machine learning or artificial intelligence or Gen AI model, and you have smallest particles of truth, then it's going to mean that the predictions to the future will also contain the truth. And this is why this is so incredibly important. So let's move with each other all towards a data quantum in which we can still use data to make predictions, but also to understand what is true versus what is artificially generated. And this is the main message with which I would like to kickstart our conference today. Everyone is talking about the potential and the positive aspects of generative AI. And I fully share that, if and only if it's used in a safe and sustainable way. And what that means for you and for your organization is that it requires preparation. There are a number of different ways in which you could apply this. And I'm going to leave you with three key lessons, or three pieces of advice, if you want to call it, to kind of think about as you progress through this conference. The third thing is that it will become a requirement for any organization to start establishing an enterprise data catalog. And what I mean with that is, as an organization, you want to be able to understand and keep track of which data was created naturally, or what is source data, natural source data, and what is synthetic data, so data that was generated by AI. You need, in order for future model training, you need to have an understanding of that, and you need to categorize and label it. The only practical way to do that for large organizations these days is to establish that into an enterprise data catalog. That also means that based on that cycle that I just showed you, as an organization, you will need to start defining machine learning training data policies. In other words, what will be the input and source data upon which you will be basing your next models and your predictions? If you look at some of the largest companies in the world, they already do this. They have policies in place that will safeguard this. But a lot of, I would say, more newer organizations that are newer to these kinds of technologies don't have this. So this is a key lesson to really take away, that you need to care around what models are going to be trained on. And establishing policies or best practices is something that every organization can do and which will safeguard that prediction towards the future. And then third, and I'm probably preaching to the converted right here because you're already in a conference in which you're trying to learn something, is educate. And then I, after that, put educate again. You need to establish, as an organization, formal training programs to make employees understand how models are trained and which information can or cannot be trusted based on which specific criteria. A few slides ago, I mentioned that more than half the people who are using Gen AI solutions trust that data in order to make decisions. And I'm not saying that that is wrong, but you do need to be able to make people understand who first use this that it's based on a machine learning algorithm and therefore not necessarily true. So educate and educate again. So I'm almost coming towards a close. I'm already getting a sign that I need to hurry up a little bit. So I'd like to leave you, and for those who've been with me in previous conferences know that I always like to give three key takeaways to summarize a session. First key takeaway is understand synthetic data. The quantity of synthetic data, as we have seen, will overtake original source data just within the next few years. The more we keep using these kinds of solutions, the more synthetic data will be created. Second key takeaway is that you need to make sure that everyone understands how model training works. If you're basing your decisions on a solution like this, you need to know the pros and cons around that, because otherwise it can lead towards a reinforcement bias and ultimately towards an incorrect prediction. And then last but not least, and this is the summary of the theme of this conference this year, understand the data quantum. Organizations need to understand and manage the smallest building blocks of truth and take active measures to safeguard this. And I really would like you to take that away from this session, is that data quantum, we're trying as organizations, as people, and as a society to find and develop and safeguard those building blocks of truth so that we don't get into situations where data or synthetic data could alter predictions towards the future. Now, those are my three key takeaways from this opening session today, where it's almost time to start diving into the breakout sessions. But before I do that, just some final thoughts on how you can best enjoy this conference. First and foremost, learn. We have collected, and I'm not exaggerating, some of the brightest minds in the industry around data. People who wrote books, professors, people who are teaching this on a daily basis, some of the largest organizations in the world. You have access during these big data days to some of the world's leading experts. So learn, ask questions, and educate yourself around how you could use this better towards the future. Secondly, connect. You will see in the live chats, in the questions, names of people or positions that might interest you. Connect with each other throughout the conference, but also through social media or LinkedIn or any other kind of platform, so that you have some benefit of attending this conference. And last but not least, have fun. We have some more serious topics during this conference. We also have some lighter topics. Sometimes it's also good to learn something around a particular topic that you might not immediately need in your work, but just is fun to know a little bit more around that. And with that, I would like to leave and close this opening hour of Big Data Days 2024. Thank you so much for being part of our conference, for participating in this event, and we really hope you will enjoy the next 2 days with all of these sessions from different speakers all across the world. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you. Good. It's almost time to close. For the sake of time, unfortunately, I don't have time to dive into questions, but because our next speakers are already there. And in a little over 5 minutes. In session number 1, we're going to listen to Saba Samien and Jan Go. We're going to talk about Edge AI and Tiny ML, application advantages and limitations. And in track number 2, with my colleague John, we're going to listen to Kassam Shaikh, who is going to talk about prompt engineering, an art or science, or your next particular job title. I know it's a very difficult pick, but make your choice, and we will see all of you back in 5 minutes for the next sessions. Thank you so much.